Hare Krishna.
Okay. I want to also greet our online group who have joined us every Sunday. I do hope there may be some newcomers as part of our outreach effort. So hopefully many people may take this opportunity to listen to a very interesting topic. I can directly relate to it because I have a problem with that myself. Okay, talk about wandering mind, and I may not do as much multitasking, but I'm doing enough of it too. So anyway, Hare Krishna, all of you, please, I'm very happy to welcome you to join our Sunday evening program talk. Our special guest is His Grace Vraj Vihari Prabhu. So Prabhu actually joined as a student in ISKCON in 1977. After 12 years as a brahmachari, he got married to a nice lady, Anand Vrindavan Devi, and then both moved to Vrindavan, India, where Prabhu actually was the director of the Vrindavan Institute of Higher Education. And in 2002, he also started ISKCON Resolve. I think it's doing a wonderful service to many people. I think also within ISKCON, because the name itself says ISKCON there. So if anyone has question, maybe later on they can ask Prabhuji about that. And now, while it's interesting, he actually have a higher postgraduate degree in conflict resolution. And interestingly, he worked on a project for the Supreme Court of India for 3 years. As part of it, he actually trained judges and senior advocates in the process of mediation and conflict resolution. Currently, Prabhu resides in Washington, D.C., where he teaches Bhakti Sastri and Bhakti Vaibhav courses. He continues to run ISKCON Resolve and works for the United States government. His wife is the temple president of Washington, D.C. It's a wonderful temple to visit. It's a long time ago I visited there. Perhaps, if I'm not mistaken, only temple in North America with Sitaram, Lakshman, Hanumanji deities, or is there another one? To my knowledge,
sure. I have to think about that. I haven't thought about that before. Not sure.
Yeah, but wonderful, wonderful location. Very nice temple. Prabhuji, thanks again. Over to you now. What I would suggest is perhaps after the talk, or even as you feel during the talk, should there be any question, be kind enough to respond to that. And definitely after the talk, we'll spend at least 10-15 minutes. There's no specific time limit. We are saying that typically around 6:45. So that would be our limit.
Okay. Tomorrow morning or this evening, 6:45?
This evening.
Okay.
Now around 15 minutes.
And how do the devotees on Facebook, how did they ask questions or make comments?
If there are any, we will pass them.
Okay, so here. You type it in or something. Okay, good. All right. And we do have a special guest. We have Brahmatirtha Prabhu, who's the co-director of ISKCON Resolve, who's listening in. And he's also the, I don't know if you can say co-author with Srila Prabhupada, but he's the person who spoke to Prabhupada in the book Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers.
Oh, yes.
And he's listening in while he's multitasking.
Okay, Brahmatirtha Prabhu, a special welcome to you too, on behalf of ISKCON Ottawa.
Okay, so I am going to, so yeah, two things. One is that this is a PowerPoint presentation, a large part of it. So I will be sharing my screen in a minute. And I do appreciate the idea that we keep this very informal. So anytime there's a question or a comment, feel free to either go off mute or put it in the chat, or if you're on Facebook, however you communicate, whoever is monitoring the Facebook folks, feel free to just pass that on. Don't worry about interrupting me or anything like that. I like to keep this casual, and I think the learning is better that way. Okay, so yeah, seatbelts on, and we will start. Here we go. All right, so there's the title, Focus, How Multitasking and the Wandering Mind Ruin Our Krishna Consciousness and Our Health. Okay, so this verse is a very important verse in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 41, where Krishna says, Vyavasai yamika buddhir ekeha. AK, we all probably know what that word means, one or single. And so those who are on this path are resolute in purpose and their aim is one. And people whose intelligence isn't very focused, they are bahushaka, they are many branched. And this was a super important verse in the context of the Gita and also for those who are followers of Srila Prabhupada, because he got inspiration from this verse. He said himself that although there was no possibility, meaning how could he come to America and start a worldwide movement? But I took it a little seriously by studying a commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 41. He gives his commentary that we should take up the words from the spiritual master as our life and soul. We should try to carry out the instruction, the specific instruction of the spiritual master very rigidly, without caring for our personal benefit or loss. So this is, Prabhupada did this, right? He was single-minded in his focus on carrying out his guru's instruction to him and in carrying out, therefore, the purport of this verse, which is a very, very important verse in the Bhagavad Gita and has a very special place in the heart of Srila Prabhupada's followers. Now, another really important verse in the Bhagavad Gita has this in it, Brahmabhuta Prasanatma. Prasanatma means very satisfied, very happy when one is on the Brahman platform. And when one's on that platform, what do? Na sochati, na kankshati. They don't lament and they don't hanker, or in this translation, they don't desire to have things, material things. So when our mind is spiritually situated, we don't lament and we don't hanker. Now this is a very important concept that we'll be revisiting throughout this, what would you say, 13 and a half hour class. So Prabhupada said that what is the symptom of joyous life? No more hankering, no more lamenting. We are hankering after something which we do not possess, and we are lamenting after something we had which we have lost. So as soon as you come to the spiritual platform, then you will understand, I do not belong to this material world. So what is my gain and what is my loss? I do not belong to this platform at all. So this hankering and lamenting, it's all in the mind. It's all in the mind. It's like, what is that called? Akash Pushpa, like a flower in the sky, which, obviously doesn't exist. And that's kind of what are all these things in our mind that I want, I should have said this, and it's all part and parcel of our mind. Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote this stanza in his beautiful poem, Saragrahi Vaishnava. Forget the past that sleeps, and ne'er the future dream at all, but act in times that are with thee, and progress thee shall call. And it seems that he got some inspiration from the poet Longfellow, who wrote something similar. Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past, the past that's dead, bury its dead. Act in the living present, heart within and God overhead. So just this whole idea of we only have the present, and yet our mind slips so easily into the future and so easily into the past. So before we start talking a little bit about mindfulness, I just thought I'd talk a little bit more about the mind, because it's such a pivotal aspect of our lives. When it's I don't know if control is the right word, but when it's utilized properly or when it's utilized improperly, it has such a effect on us. Krishna said, Udared Atmanatmanam, Natmanam avasadhyat, Atmaiva Hyatmana Bandur. Bandur, what does Bandur or Bandhu mean? Anyone know?
I think it's translated as friend.
Friend? Somebody say friend?
Yes, friend.
Yeah, friend, right. So Bandur. So your mind can be your friend, or Atmaiva Vipur Atmanaha. Anyone know what Vipur means?
Ripu is enemy.
Yes. So the same thing can be our friend or our enemy. And I think it's amazing if we study the 23rd chapter of the 11th canto, and we hear about the Avanti Brahmana. And he has a story about his life, which maybe we won't go into too much detail, but he was a very miserly person. And at some point in his life, although he was very wealthy, he lost everything. And people would treat him cruelly. They'd spit on him, they'd ridicule him, they'd pass urine on the food that he had begged, they would take his clothes, they'd throw them away, they'd do all kinds of terrible things. And his realization was, these people are not the cause of my happiness and distress. Neither are the demigods, my own body, the planets, my past work or time. Rather, it is the mind alone that causes happiness and distress and perpetuates the rotation of material life. And he says, all the senses have been under the control of the mind since time immemorial. And the mind himself never comes under the sway of any other. The mind is stronger than the strongest, and his godlike power is fearsome. Therefore, anyone who can bring the mind under control becomes the master of all senses. And failing to conquer this irrepressible enemy, the mind whose urges are intolerable and who torments the heart, many people are completely bewildered and create useless quarrel with others. Thus, they conclude that other people are either their friends, their enemies, or parties indifferent to them. And then he says a prayer that sannyasis chant 3 times daily, that I shall cross over the insurmountable ocean of nescience by being firmly fixed in the service of the lotus feet of Krishna. This was approved by the previous acharyas who were fixed in firm devotion to the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I don't think anyone is so powerfully, except maybe Krishna himself, described the nature of the mind. Has anyone on the call, either in Facebook or Zoom, ever had any experience struggling to control your mind? So it's no problem for anyone?
Yes, always.
Always.
It is always with everyone, I would say.
It's a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. Every time it's a challenge.
And it's so illusory. I don't know where this statistic comes from. I mean, I don't know how, in other words, I don't know how they calculated this. But there's one statistic that says 83% of this is not a devotee, 83% of our thinking process is repetitive and useless. And have you ever experienced that on your mind? You feel kind of like a hamster on what is it called, that wheel? That the mind just keeps going, that person did this to me, I'm going to get back at them. Why did they do that to me? And we just, it goes around and around and around in the mind.
What I find very annoying, Prabhu,
Yes.
is going to go grocery shopping and having that ridiculous, annoying music that they have. And if you go early in the morning, it's more loud because there's less people. Is it bothering other people or is it just me? It's hard to focus on Krishna when you have this crazy.
So let me rephrase that. So you're allowing that to bother you?
It bothers me. Yes, I try to stop it. I really, really try.
I didn't think they allowed that in Canada. I thought that was just an American thing.
Oh, no. Go to Walmart and grocery store and it's constant music. Constant.
Muzak, they call it. Okay, well,
yeah,
so we all have, but the interesting thing, Mataji, is that we all have our muzak. In other words, that bothers you, something else bothers someone else. What you could also do is find out where the music is coming from and cut the wire.
Well, it all comes from Toronto. I already checked on that.
Okay. Well, you could, that is a little hard.
Yeah, I'm in New Brunswick here. I'm in New
You're
Brunswick.
in New Brunswick. No wonder you're so happy.
Thank you. I'm happy because I have a vegetable and flower garden now for Krishna.
Very good. Very good. So yeah, but we all have our muzak, that whether it's our mind saying that person did this to me, or our favorite sports team didn't win, or why did what's his name, Mr. Leonard leave the Raptors and go back to another team, whatever it is. So many things bother us. And what the Advanti Brahmana is saying is that a lot of it's our mind. It's our mind. Mm-hmm. So let's go back to the PowerPoint.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Continue. Unless someone else has another point they'd like to make or a question. Any questions or comments? Okay. So mindfulness is something very, very popular in the world today. Very, very popular, especially in Buddhist practice, but also in just something that's just kind of new age and not religious in any way. And what it is this is how it's defined usually, that it means paying attention in a very particular way on purpose. So you really try to think of something or observe your breathing is a big thing in mindfulness practice, and be very much in the present moment, not lamenting, not hankering, and not judgmentally, not saying, oh, that's a good thought, that's a bad thought. Being kind of like Krishna says, sukha dukkha same kritva labdha labdho jayam jaya, being fixed and not seeing friends and enemies, happiness and distress, heat and cold, just being non-judgmental. And they say that you really want to practice it well as if your life depended on it. So we'll go back to this definition a little bit, but usually, at least in beginning mindfulness, it's often focusing on your breath. Because the reason they do that is because you can't really think about a future breath or lament about a past breath. You can only be thinking about that breath that you're having right now. Okay, so now let's look at the Bhagavad Gita and what it says about these things, okay? So the Bhagavad Gita says that sattva guna, there's these three qualities, three energies in the world, mode of goodness, mode of passion, and mode of ignorance. And sattva guna is being very much in the present. And it usually, a person who's in the mode of goodness, they've created some distance between them and their thoughts. A person in the mode of goodness can observe their thoughts almost like a third person observer, and just watching where the mind goes, but not identifying with it. Right? Like, what are we thinking about right now? Are we thinking about, oh, I don't know if that casserole in the oven is going to burn? Are we listening very carefully to what Vraj Vihari is saying? Or are we thinking about this or that? And a person in the mode of goodness can watch their mind and direct it where it should go. So similar to this point, that we can witness our thoughts without identifying them. Wouldn't that be wonderful to decide which thoughts are actually anukul, which are actually favorable to our Krishna consciousness, and then say, oh, well then I'll kind of ride that thought like a surfer would ride a wave or something. And then, oh, that thought, no, that's pratikul, that's not favorable, throw that one in the garbage, right? So witnessing our thoughts. And having this freedom of choice about what we want the mind to think about, what we want to think about, or what we want our mind to focus on. So that's, and the whole idea that there may be a stimulus, someone may, of course, Canadian drivers are so polite, but someone cuts you off, and instead of immediately honking your horn or saying some nasty things to them, you pause and think, what should my response be? So a person in the mode of goodness takes that pause between the stimulus and the response and chooses what action or what reaction that they want to have. Okay, so I'll go through the other two, passion, ignorance, and I'll take questions or comments. Okay, so someone in the mode of passion is often thinking about the future, right? And that means their mind is drawn away very quickly from what's happening in the here and now. And of course we plan for the future. We're not talking about not having any plans, but there's a difference between, let's say, consciously saying, oh, I'm going to sit down now and plan my retirement. I'm going to sit down right now and plan my trip to Ottawa or to India or wherever. I'm going to plan what we're going to do for my spouse's birthday, right? That's fine. But often the mind just starts unnecessarily planning and thinking about the future without us having much choice in the matter. And we worry about what might happen to us, what might take place, how someone might react to us, right? Anyone have ever had this experience? We kind of enter into a fantasy world that may or may not ever take place. Mark Twain once said that many terrible things have happened to me, and luckily most of them never took place. So that means, you know, he was worrying about something. And I'm sure this happens to us a lot. We worry about something, and when it actually happens, it's not always as bad as we thought. Sometimes it's worse, but the worrying about it didn't help any. And then the mode of ignorance is we often lament about the past. We become filled, oh, I should have said that, I should have, you know, I coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? But we can't take back what is done. And this doesn't mean we don't learn from our mistakes. It's like the saying goes, it's okay to make mistakes, but don't make the same mistake a second time to learn. So it's very wonderful how this thing that's kind of cool these days, mindfulness, Krishna spoke 5,000 years ago in the Bhagavad Gita about these points. Yeah, so some thoughts about the Gita and mode of passion, mode of goodness. What are your comments or questions?
My thoughts are that it's easier said than done.
Yep. Nobody said it was going to be easy. Yep. There's even a song, easier said than done. Yep.
I never heard it.
You're not missing anything. Other points besides that brilliant comment by Lakshmi Moni Devi?
Well, it's very difficult to be in the mindfulness state. You know, actually it must be done with intention. Very often we forget about even the intention. So we may try to do it without really being serious about it. So therefore we are not able to succeed.
Right. So how would we overcome that problem?
I think we keep listening to your lecture, this presentation again.
Yes. Well, that's one way. It's also the fact that it's also very helpful when we come to the realization that we can't do it on our own. And we'll talk about some of the practical things at the end of this talk, but we can't do it on our own. And that gives, existentially, that puts us in the right consciousness if we realize that Krishna will have to help us.
Okay, okay, makes sense.
Krishna says basically, you're trying to get out of Maya? He says, forget about it. It's not going to happen. But if I help you, then it can happen. So, also in the 8th chapter of the Gita, Krishna says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanu smara yudhyacha. He says that, okay, remember me and then try your hardest. Or in this case, he was telling Arjuna to do his duty. So we do all the things that we're going to be talking about in this presentation, and we beg for Krishna's help. Does that sound like a good formula?
I think so, certainly.
Okay. Other questions or comments? You guys were more talkative last time we had a class.
I have a question.
Okay.
On the slide that you mentioned,
Who's talking?
sadhana.
Okay. Yes, Sadhana.
On the slide that you mentioned, ignorance. You talk about should have, would have, could have. Isn't that similar to repentance, or is that
Great question.
different?
No, that's a fantastic question. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. Yes. Yes, it's almost like the difference between guilt and shame. Okay, if you ever listen to any of the YouTube videos by Brene Brown, she talks about this. So, you know, shame is I am bad, and guilt is I did something that was bad. You know, so it's not everything about me is terrible, but that thing I did was bad. Okay, so and your question was about repentance?
That's right.
Yeah.
Like
okay.
regret. Yeah.
Regret, right. So Prabhupada also writes in several places that regret automatically comes into the mind of a sincere person. Okay, so it's natural and it's good, and it has its limitations, because what happens. Another thing that Krishna says in the Gita in the 2nd chapter, he says, "Dhyayato visaya punsang sangasteshu bhajayache," that when you meditate on bad things, you tend to want to do them again. Right? So that's one thing. And then another thing is, it can just get us kind of depressed if we lament too much. So it's one thing to say, okay, like it says here, this is different than learning from our mistakes. I really blew it that time. I'm not going to let that happen again. I've learned from my mistakes. Hare Krishna. That's great, right? And maybe I apologize to so-and-so for what I did, or I correct the wrong, or, you know, I, pay back my neighbor for breaking the lawnmower, or whatever, right? We clear up the mistake we made. But if we kick ourselves, oh God, I can't believe I did that to his lawnmower. He's never going to talk to me again. That was so stupid. We don't have that much money, and now I have to fix it. Oh my God, you know. And then the mind can just dig us into this hole of lamentation. So, and it's one of the tricks of the mind, because, as you're pointing out, regret and mea culpa is a good thing, but it's almost like, you know, so is strawberry ice cream, but, you know, after the 5th scoop, it's nauseating, right? So a little of it is good, and then moving on. But otherwise, the mode of ignorance, as it says here, can capture us. Is that what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's it explains everything. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think it's a great question, Sadhana, and it's something that we can, our mind, and you know, we talk about the mind can trick us. Okay, it's almost like we think we're being sincere if we just beat ourselves up forever about something. So thank you for that. Anything else?
Yes, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, this is Surendra.
Yes, Surendra.
I have a question. You mentioned a very strong point is that about some English author is that, you know, a lot of terrible things happen, but they never took place, something like that.
Mark Twain, yeah, he was an American author, actually, yeah.
Yes, and you know, I am into that situation by living so far away from India, and it's more towards a worry side, that a near and dear one is in trouble, and for whatever reasons, and sometimes I attach myself to that particular either person or the situation. How to kind of take this? Yes, sometimes it goes in extreme in a lamentation way, and I kind of make sure that it doesn't enter into the daily life as a disturbance, but it's still, you know, it is there.
Yeah.
And so how should we from the Shastric perspective, how should we control ourselves and go? And it will be there. We will see it, and it's not that the moment we see it, we jumping and dancing and laughing and doing kirtan. No.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. Does your worrying has that helped the situation?
Not at all.
Not at all. Okay.
Not at all.
All right. So that's the first thing. And of course, we know there's a difference between that cognitive realization and the emotional part of it. But at least we know theoretically, gosh, that hasn't helped at all.
And it will not. It's just emotional thing, as you just said. Nothing else.
Correct. Yes. So then we might turn. Okay. So we've acknowledged that it's not helping. It's not helping the persons in India. It's not helping you. Right? It's not helping. So then we could turn. Sometimes it helps to get really practical. I had a professor once that said, it's okay to have your head in the clouds as long as your feet are on the ground. And Srila Prabhupada was obviously super philosophical, but he was also incredibly practical. Right? He, when you see on his the diaries that he kept, the journals that he kept, that he kept track of every penny that was spent. He didn't want to waste a penny of Krishna's money. So then the question, Surendraji, might be, is there something I can do? Do they have, I don't know, do they have a fast enough internet connection that I can keep in touch with them every day? Or do I need to buy them whatever that thing was, Facebook, whatever it is, that thing that, where you know what I mean, that's easy to see them? Or can I pay somebody to look at, check in with them every day? Whatever it is there anything that I can do practically to help the situation? Because sometimes when we act practically on something that we're worrying about, it's such a relief, because we're actually, we're just making a distinction between things that we worry about, that we're concerned about, and things that we actually have influence over. And there's that beautiful prayer called the Serenity Prayer that I'm just paraphrasing it. Maybe somebody knows it by heart, or they can put it in the chat. But my Lord, please let me let go of the things that I can't control. Let me take control of things that I can control, and let me have the wisdom to know the difference between the two of them. It's not so easy sometimes to know the difference. But you can see, Surendra, that this is kind of the problem with the mind. It's what you're saying the Advanti Brahmana said thousands of years ago, that it's just our mind. Even it starts in a well-meaning way, that we care for these people. It can gradually gnaw away at us and actually not be healthy for our mental health, our physical health, and our spiritual health. So what was the name? Sadhana writes, what was the name of the person who mentioned while we spoke about regret? Oh, Brene Brown. I generally don't recommend, necessarily non-devotee people. I'll just put it in is there a chat? Yeah, everyone chat. So what do you think about that, Surendra?
Yes, it helps. You said some sentence in English, is that it's okay as long as your feet is on the ground, and that is the common platform where we generally discuss. And the truth is that it's very pleasing when we talk about spiritual things, and things go very smooth. And any other topic, it just doesn't work out. So.
And the other thing we can do is we can pray to Krishna.
Yes.
Now that's actually practical. You're here. Where do these people live? What part of India?
Yeah, Udaipur, Nathdwara, that area, Rajasthan.
I love Udaipur. Nathdwara also.
Yes, that's where I am from. So around that.
I love Nathdwara. One of my favorite places. The darshan is like a football match.
Yes.
You get crushed during the darshan.
Yes. When we were child, there used to be a class before going to the temple, that how will you approach today's darshan?
Yes. So anyway, we can pray to Nathji that I'm so far away, they're in Nathdwar. Krishna, you please take care. I'm also going to do this and that practically, but I realize I'm not there. I can't do anything, especially during the pandemic. Krishna, please take care.
Thank you very much.
All right, TK. And here's the
Hare
serenity
Krishna.
prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Yes, someone else had a point?
Yes, Hare Krishna. This is Krishna Dwaldas.
Hare Krishna.
I just had a question. Hare Krishna. I wanted to see, are there any instances or situation where a little bit of worry or mental turmoil can be necessary, or can be useful, or can be helpful?
A little bit, just a spoonful.
Or maybe more, I don't know, a lot?
Sure, yeah. But it should be an impetus for us to take shelter of Krishna. Prabhupada, was anxious, in a spiritual sense about getting the land in Mayapur, right? He was anxious about the way devotees were dealing with that one gentleman in Mumbai, the land in Mumbai. But then he would also say, yes, I've been praying to Krishna. So all of these things can be anukul, they can be favorable if we then turn to Krishna. The whole idea is to turn to Krishna, right? Even if it's for material, akama sava kama va moksha kama udaradi, that even if we sometimes have a bit of a material desire, it's better to turn to Krishna. So that doesn't mean, the problem is that some people think it's either or, Krishna Jalal. It's either I do things practically or I turn to Krishna. But Arjuna did both. He turned to Krishna and then he got out his Gandiva bow and took care of business. So yes, a little worry is just natural, right? I assume you're a parent, Krishna Jalal Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, so we worry about our children. If they're going off to school, will they be safe? Or, how old are your children?
They are 4, 6, and 8.
Okay, so it's probably not yet. I remember the first time in Vrindavan, my son went to Bihari Lal's, the shop across the street, by himself. We gave him some rupees, and he went by himself. And I was chanting and praying and nervous like anything until he came back in one piece. So there's certain natural things like that, yet we try not to let things get out of hand. And usually you can feel it in your heart that you're not really remembering Krishna at all, and you're just in material anxiety. And that's sometimes Krishna kind of tapping us on the shoulder and say, hey, Krishna Dulal, you forgot somebody. You forgot about me. Is that all right?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. That's my 2 cents. If Brahmatirtha or Lakshmi Moni want to add to anything I've just said, I'm open to hear from my seniors. Okay, just chime in if you want to. So let's continue, okay? Go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so multitasking. You like that picture? So multitasking, here's a present reality for at least some of us. We do other things while chanting. Now, come on, has anyone ever done that? Anyone ever done any cleaning or, whatever? We sometimes do, or we fall asleep or our mind wanders while hearing or reading. Has that ever happened? We check our phone, texts, or emails far too often. They say that the average American checks their phone 96 times a day, or 10 every 10 minutes, I guess it is. And I think that's low. So I think millennials do it a lot more often than that. But we can get quite habituated to doing those things. Yeah, anyone ever walk and text? That's in some ways that's proven to be as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than driving and texting, at least in certain cities. Or we drive and talk or text. We watch something on a computer while we're having lunch or breakfast or dinner. We are hooked on the urgency addiction. If you ever read well, I got that saying from a book by Stephen Covey, a famous book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Persons. Or you can read the Dilbert version, The 7 Habits of Highly Defective Persons. But anyway, he talks about the urge that we get addicted to doing things urgently. We like to figuratively ride on our white horse into town, shoot everyone up, and then ride off into the sunset, instead of planning things so not everything is urgent. So the concerns about being bahusaka or multitasking. One is that it's an illusion. Research shows that task switching is different than multitasking, and at least if both of the tasks need some cognitive energy, need your mind, you actually switch back quickly and you're not actually multitasking. And the research shows that it can really slow us down, even 40% of our productivity. And it causes stress. I think we could say, in terms of the Gita, it causes a lot of the mode of passion, maybe some ignorance, but a lot of the mode of passion. It can be not so good about our performance, our service. We talked about you can only do, and it can be dangerous, especially if we're driving and texting or whatever. So that's some of the concerns. And this is a statement by Vraj Vihari Prabhu in his book called Japa. This is specifically about sadhana, about our spiritual practice of chanting. He says, to be detached, if we find we haven't listened to our first 15 rounds, never mind. We do not have the freedom to bring those mantras back. Neither can we promise to do better in the future, so no hankering and no lamenting. We have only enough freedom to listen to the mantra, starting with the one holy name we are chanting now, so being in the present. There is no point lamenting about the past or worrying about the future. Better to simply hear the one mantra we are chanting in the present. So I'll do one or two more slides and see if you have questions or comments. So we should try to chant in a mindful way, which means being present, just hearing the mantra that we're chanting now. The mind will say, oh gosh, I can't believe it. I still have 7 rounds left. Oh, right? Or we're thinking about what we're going to be doing during the day, and I got to make that phone call, and I have to send that email, and I have to get the car fixed, and all of these things, they pop up. And what's so interesting is the negativity in the mind is caused when we deny the present. Isn't that an interesting statement? If you think about almost all the really bad things that come up in the mind, it doesn't happen when we're focused right now. It happens when we worry about the future and lament the past. And so here's some symptoms of thinking too much about the future. We become uneasy, we become anxious, we have tension, we have stress, we have worry. These are all, in one sense, some forms of fear. And they're caused by too much future thinking and not enough being in the present. And there's that famous verse in the 11th canto about how fear is like the one of the basis of material existence. And then lamenting about the past, the mode of ignorance, guilt, or maybe I should put shame, regret, resentment, and this is all too much of that, because Sadhana pointed out that a little bit is not, grievances, sadness, bitterness, and all forms of non-forgiveness are often caused by too much thinking about the past and not enough being in the present. So, some of your thoughts on some of those points that we just covered?
Yes, I do recognize, this happening very often. In fact, it's a challenge to be mindful or be in the present moment.
Yes.
I'm looking for any ways actually to slowly get into that habit. I don't think I can do it overnight. Obviously, it takes practice. So any kind of practical hints, maybe you can.
Yes, well, we're going to cover that in the upcoming slides. So I'll give you a post-dated check.
Could you speak something about the balance between, just a in joke, between strategic planning and between being in the present?
Well, strategically planning means that in the present you've decided consciously to think about the future. And that's very different than the mind almost against the will of the soul, or we could say almost unconsciously slipping into that. Now, I'm not saying there's no overlap, but I think one is the use of our Krishna conscious determination muscle and awareness. And the other one is almost like the modes of material nature taking over. And you could almost say possessing us.
It seems like sometimes when we feel too comfortable or too normal, or things are going too automatic, so to speak, then we want to think about the future. We want to increase, we want to grow, we want to change things, we want to make things bigger. And so then we start thinking about the future instead of the present.
Mm-hmm.
Because the present doesn't offer us anything terribly enlivening or exciting or whatever.
Yeah, as long as I think that's fine, especially if it's somehow related to, anashaktasya vishayan yartaham upayunjita nirbandha Krishna sambandha. If there's a connection with Krishna, the Krishna sambandha, relationship to Krishna, then that's fine. Prabhupada would sometimes say that the best function of the mind is planning how to spread Krishna consciousness. So that, again, that's that conscious, yes, okay, let's sit down now and plan, plan for our retirement and how we're going to have enough money so that we can focus on hearing and chanting and serving at the temple or something like that. That's totally fine. But I think that's quite a different feeling than, oh my God, is that going to happen? And, I can't believe that person said that to me, and now I'm going to do this, and I think we can usually feel the difference in our heart or in our gut between when it's the modes putting us in a fearful frame of mind and us making conscious plans, and what to speak of Krishna conscious plans. That's the best I could do, Lakshmi. I mean, I tried to say that in the beginning earlier, that we're not saying it's not thinking about the future. It's making that conscious choice to think about the future. I don't know if that's satisfying, but that's the best I think I can do. Okay. Other questions or comments?
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
The mind control. At the present situation, we are unable to get mind control while chanting or doing prasadam making or something else. Well, we chant, but the chanting is not effective. How to overcome this difficulty?
Well, we've already said to try to just listen to the one mantra that we're chanting at this time, and to feel that we've been very successful if we've heard that one mantra. And then, of course, go on to the next mantra. Arjuna said the same thing. He told Krishna, forget about it. I can't control my mind. It's impossible. It's harder. It's easier to control the wind. And Krishna didn't say, yeah, Arjuna, you're right. Forget about it. No, he said it's possible by abhyas and vairagya, by practice and renouncing the thoughts that come in like waves into the mind. So we will be talking more about that in the next few slides. Some practical. Maybe we should go on to that now. Now, one person asked about post-traumatic stress and diagnosed mental illness. That is a different category, and this class is not, this presentation is not given by a mental health professional. I have done some study in trauma and things, but I don't, we do have some devotees, especially one devotee I'm thinking, Ram Baru Mataji, Prabhupada disciple, who does help devotees sometimes in post-traumatic stress conditions, but it's not my, there's other devotees as well. But that is something that may need some special care by someone who's trained in that, and great if they're trained in that and also a devotee of Krishna. Okay, let us sally forth. Back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so here's some solutions about reading. There's an idea about prayerful reading. It's a little essay that Vraj Vihari Prabhu wrote, but the idea basically is reading slowly and really trying to take in each sentence that Prabhupada writes and meditating upon it and focusing on it instead of sometimes, I'm sure we've all read a few pages of the Gita or the Bhagavatam and then we don't remember one word about what we just read, even though our eyes glazed over each word, right? Another practical thing about any sadhana practice, especially reading, is trying to choose the best time of the day. Often our body has like biorhythms when we're feeling a little more tired and when we're feeling a little bit more alive and awake. Often morning is best. And then a really good thing, if we're doing any chanting, reading, whatever, taking prasadam even, is to turn off don't have our phones present, don't have our computers on, or, the things that, or turn off our notifications, they go, bing, your boss just contacted you. Unless, again, you're actually working at that time and you're on a super heavy deadline, there may be some exceptions, but in general, things can wait until we finish chanting, until we finish reading, until we finish having our meals, like that. The mode of passion makes us think that it's almost like anytime we get a notification, it's almost like a little boost to our ego. Oh, I'm important enough that I got a notification. So it's good, technology makes a good servant and a terrible master. And it's very much depending, how we use it. I mean, I actually think, computers are such a double-edged sword. They can be, like we're using it tonight, for a great, for a good purpose of sadhu sangha. And they can be, what is it? What did that one person say? Weapons of mass distraction. That person who was talking to Radhanath Swami in that one debate they had. So that's that. Now, in the midst of it all, we must still remember Krishna. The story about Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he was, I think this was Bombay. Lakshmani can correct me, or BT. But he was going to try to, I think it was Bombay, going to try to get permission for building the temple there, the beautiful temple that's there now. And he'd come back and didn't get the permit. Anyone who knows about bureaucracy in India, they can totally relate to that. I spent a summer in India, super hot, in Delhi, every day going to the home ministry, going here, going there, trying to get one thing accomplished. It took me all of the summer. So Prabhupada saw Tamal Krishna Maharaj coming back, dejected, and he wasn't dancing. And he said, even if you don't get the permit from the government, still you should dance in kirtan. So in the midst of whatever blah, blah is happening in our life, Krishna is always smiling. He's always waiting for us to turn to him. I know that's not easy to understand, and it's so much easier to give a class about this than to actually do it, but it's the reality. It's 90% our mind just really absorbed in this or that, which has nothing to do with our soul and our actual relationship with Krishna. So if we can sometimes put our mind in context a little bit and can be very helpful. So I just got out of the, sorry about that. So the next point is, now, if we can cool our mind down a little bit and cultivate the mode of goodness, it's amazing the kind of realizations we get. This is also from Vraj Vihari Prabhu's book on japa. He says, so determined is the mind to maintain the materialistic conception of life that simply by controlling it and slowing it down, even if you engage in no other sadhana, no other practice, the soul will be carried close to transcendence towards Brahman realization, just by cooling down the mind. The mind is like an overheated car that's always overheated. That may be hard to relate to in Canada in the winter. But, you know, it's just overreacting, overcomplicating things, over everything. And we can just let it cool down a little. Even if we didn't chant Hare Krishna, we could be coming closer to Brahman realization. Just 1 second. Prabhu, I'm giving a class right now, but maybe we can talk a little later with Brahmatirtha Prabhu? Okay, I'll call you. Haribol. So, by the way, oh, well, yeah, so there's many different ways to plan your life a little better. This is one that many people find. It's from a book called Getting Things Done by David Allen. I'm not going to go over this whole thing, but it's if you find that you're bahushaka, if your mind's all over the place, if you find that you're not well organized, you could consider something like this, which is a time management tool that many people have found, millions, thousands of people have found helpful. Okay, so now some other solutions about empty the mind of stuff. Because if you know you're chanting, have you ever been chanting and your mind says, "Oh, I got to go to the post office today. Oh, I got to go do this. Oh, I got to do that." I'm not saying you should necessarily write things down while you're chanting, but in general, it's good to have some kind of tool, whether it's on your phone or a piece of paper and a pen, to just write things down so they're out of your mind and there's some place safe that you know you're going to refer to. Because otherwise the mind can come up with all kinds of things that you can't do anything about in that present moment, but distract us from being focused. Okay, so here's some other solutions. This is really practical now, okay? Now we're getting down to really practical stuff. Block time. The idea behind that is if you're in the office and you have to make some phone calls and send some emails and go to some meetings, try to have all the meetings in one block of time. Do your emails in one block of time. Make some phone calls in one block of time. Don't go from one email to a couple of meetings, then to a phone call, this, that. You can actually save a lot of time if you put your time during the day in blocks. It's also important to take some breaks. The mind can overheat and it can't just work, or the body and the mind can't just work at 100% all day long. Consider getting those apps that take you offline for a time if you're working on something. If you're reading the Bhagavatam or you're working on something at work and you find that those notifications or those emails coming in just distract you, there are so many different applications now that can take you offline for some time. How about this one? Has anyone ever been on a conference call and either emailing or playing solitaire or washing your dishes or doing anything? And have you ever been called out on it? Right? You're answering your emails and they say, to you, "Hey, Lakshmi Moni, what do you think of that idea?" And she goes, "What? Huh? Oh, could you repeat that, please?" Because we weren't paying attention. So best to just focus on that conference call. Maybe even follow the next idea is have that call in half the time. And then also know about, remember we talked about biorhythms earlier, know when you have good energy for things that take a lot of thinking, and know when it's better to do things like wash the dishes or address some envelopes or do something that does not take a lot of cognitive energy. Now this is a brave move. consider something like just looking at your email 3 times a day. Some of you say impossible, and some of you may have bosses that won't let you do that. But it's an amazing thing to not let the emails take over your life and not have your in basket be where your brain is. And don't be afraid to nicely say no. They say no is the new yes. So sometimes if we really have something that we really want to accomplish in our life, then it's easy to gauge any offer that's, Prabhu, can you do this, can you do that, in light of that service that we want to render. And sometimes saying no is the best thing, because we can, or the saying is the enemy of great is good. We can do so many good things in this world, but it's, even the idea of Varnashram is we're all programmed to do something great for Krishna. And if we let other nice things or other good things get in the way of doing something really wonderful for Krishna, that in one sense may be a neglect of the kind of special abilities Krishna gave us. Okay, some more practical things. If you're with somebody and your phone rings, now I just blew, well, I only did it for 3 seconds, right? I just said, Prabhu, I'll call you later. But maybe I should have let it go to voicemail, especially knowing that this bullet point was coming up. But it's more important to be with the people that you are with than to answer that phone, generally speaking.
Yeah, Acharya Tisha says.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We already said that one. Often we put off the things that are really important because they take too much energy or they're such big tasks. It's a good idea to do some of the most important things first instead of some of the least important things. Sometimes it's a good idea. You can Google this. You can print out a time log or even just enter it online and just keep track of how you spend all your time in your life for like 3 days, and then look at it. And you'd be amazed sometimes at how you think you spend your time and how we actually spend our time. We might be very shocked at how much time we spend, for example, on the internet. Right? Avoid, well, that we know. Avoid walking into that, we know. Oh, the idea about using a real alarm clock is that often we use our phones, but that means our phone is right next to our bed or our sleeping bag if we sleep on the floor. We're Paka Brahmacharis. And that means that we have the ability to, right when we wake up, check our emails. Right? So if at all possible, try to get our japa done before we look at our emails or anything else, or the weather or whatever. Yes, and use the internet wisely. Don't be a sucker for irrelevant information. At the bottom of those news leads are often, the 50th, the 10 best provinces to retire in, or the mansions of all the famous movie stars. And we just space out and we realize, oh my God, where did that hour just go? Right? So use the internet wisely and consider the 85% rule. The 85% rule is that it was thought of by a Canadian person. I think they observed a famous sprinter, a person who ran the 100-meter dash. And they noticed that he was always in last place for the first 40 meters, and then he ended up even sometimes setting world records and winning. And they noticed that he kept his effort the same while the others pushed themselves more towards the end, and it actually slowed them down. So this rule is, instead of trying to give yourself 100% all the time, it can burn yourself out. If you try to give 85%, you can sometimes, slow and steady wins the race. So all we have is the present, and let us focus, use it in a focused way for Krishna's pleasure. Hare Krishna. So what other thoughts, comments, questions do you have?
Hare Krishna. It's Krishna Tulal Das again. I had a couple of thoughts, and I guess maybe just thoughts on it. One was multitasking seems to be actually, although, you know, as you're presenting, maybe it's not the best thing, but it seems to be a very desirable trait in our society. It's when you go and apply for a job, right, or whatever it is, they look, oh, he's able to multitask, type this, answer the phone, and do all these things at the same time. Even as far as technology is concerned, you know, the better computer is the one that can perform 100 tasks at the same time, right, and be able to do that. Even when Krishna is concerned, you know, we look at Krishna and we marvel and see, wow, he's 16,000 wives. Look at him, all those many places he's multitasking and doing that at the same time. So that was one thought that I had, and I guess, you know, my understanding of it is that it's good. You know, when you look at Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, he was all around the world, right? And he was dealing with this and that, and probably answering phone calls and putting out fires here and there. But he was focused in a way. So I guess the focus was there. His multitasking was focused that way. So that was one thought that I had.
Well, before
and then
you go on to the second one, let's do that one first.
Okay.
So,
please, yeah, thank you.
Because what you've done here is a standard kind of thing, is use the same word in different ways. So Brahmatirtha Prabhu had to go. Do you think Prabhupada multitasks?
Prabhupada was 100% focused on whatever it was he was doing. He may have had many things to do in a day, and he may have had an exceptional ability to do a lot of things in a day, like also bhaktis and, you know, doing twice as fast as everybody else. But he would still give full attention to one court case at a time. And when he was thinking about that, he just thought about it efficiently, and so he was able to finish it quickly. He didn't do many things at once. And actually, if you remember how he reacted to the phone that he had once in his life, and he only had it for a few hours, is because it was infringing upon his ability to focus and sleep. And so, you know, he was looking forward to getting it. And then when he got it and realized what it was going to do to his life, he asked them to remove it immediately.
Right. So that was the first thing I want to say, Krishna Prabhu, is that, yeah, he didn't multitask. He actually was very focused, but he did get a lot done. And he was the conductor that was running the orchestra of ISKCON, but he was doing it one clarinet at a time, so to speak. and just interesting, I while you were talking, I just Googled, is multitasking good? And here, multitasking seems a great way to get a lot done at once, but research has shown that our brains are not nearly as good at handling multiple tasks as we like to think they are. In fact, some researchers suggest that multitasking can actually reduce productivity as much as 40%. Now, you know, I'm sure there's things that, you know, here's 5 startling facts about multitasking, multitasking good or bad, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, you might, to get a job, you might say, yes, I can juggle and answer the phone and have lunch at the same time. But then when you actually get the job, you're going to get a lot more done. You're right. It's because we live in a culture that is very much focused on the mode of passion and ignorance. It may be glorified in some places, but at least anything, you know, the studies that I've done, and also just studying what Krishna says in the Gita, it's better to give 100% of our energy to what we're working on, and then give what we're 85%, you know, and then to the next thing, and then to the next thing, rather than trying to do too many things at once. You had a second point, Krishna Dua.
Krishna Dua?
You're muted. No, you're not.
Yes. Thank you very much, Prabhu. So second question was, so one can be deterred from hearing that multitasking is bad, and they may start to think that, well, if it's bad, let's say if I have to drive and I'm listening to the lecture, it's better that I just drive and not listen to the lecture, and you know, and just focus on driving, right? But at the same time, because of our lives are so busy, I'm just thinking that devotees may start to use it as an excuse to think, well, it's better that I don't do it because multitasking is bad.
Okay.
So what would you say to that?
Good question. Well, maybe I wasn't clear enough, but my main point about multitasking is two things that take cognitive energy. Now, driving is it's a bit of a tricky thing, and I certainly do listen to things while I'm driving. I don't chant my rounds while I'm driving. That's like three things. You're moving your hands on your beads or a clicker. You're supposed to be focusing on the holy name. You're supposed to be focusing on driving, and you're probably not doing any of those very well. But like, for example, if you're and just as another example, you're ironing clothes and listening to a lecture, you're cooking even and listening, there's so many things that don't take too much cognitive energy that have become habits. We can give a talk another time on habits and how to improve them and et cetera, et cetera. And they say about 45% of our life is governed by habits, and habits by definition are things you don't have to think about. They don't use a lot of cognitive energy. So yes, we can multitask, if we're going to use that word. If we're doing one thing is not taking a lot of our cognitive energy, but it really becomes a problem is when they do. And so, I'm guilty of sometimes taking phone calls while I'm driving, although there is research, all right? I think anyone can Google it, that it can be distracting. But obviously it's not as bad as when you're texting, because then you're taking your eyes off of the road, right? But that was the main point about cognitive things that take thought process. I just tried this the other day. I was trying to edit something that someone wrote and listen to a lecture at the same time. It was a total disaster. I couldn't do it because listening to something or some philosophy and then also trying to see if the words are in the right order and the spelling was right. It took way too much. They're two things that take a lot of cognitive energy.
They take similar cognitive energy too.
Yes, similar cognitive energy, right?
They require a similar attention, but like something like some people actually can hear better when they're just doing something with their hands, like making a garland or sewing or something. It actually increases their ability to hear. Because otherwise they fidget or whatever, because the one thing doesn't take much attention, the other thing you can actually hear better, but if they both take the same amount of attention or the same kind of attention, then you don't do either justice.
Very good point. What do you think about that, Krishna?
No, I think it's very nice. I guess the thought that I was thinking about, a thing that my Guru Maharaj was saying at some point. It was in reference to chanting Hare Krishna. He was saying how, some of us, let's say, yes, we hear that it's 10 offenses. It's an offense to be inattentive while chanting. So multitasking essentially. But then at the same time, even though we're doing it in that state, it's better that we keep doing that than not chanting at all. Right, so
that's true.
Because eventually, I guess it'll bring us to the platform to give up multitasking, and I guess multitasking will get us to the platform of stopping to multitask.
Maybe, yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Prabhu?
No comment.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as it's not. You know how to spell rationalize, right?
How to spell rationalize?
This has got to be some kind of mnemonic device here. What is?
How do you spell rationalize? It's R, and you're gonna have to think about this. I'll put it in the chat. Rationalize. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's in other words, there's a third alternative to either not chanting or chanting while multitasking. The third alternative is chanting while not multitasking. And I want to be clear that I have fallen into the trap of multitasking sometimes while chanting. So I'm not a perfect, as Lakshmani was saying, yad yad acharati shrestas, but I do know that I shouldn't be doing that. Other questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, this is Surrender again.
Who?
This is Surrender again.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me. So I think the multitasking you're referring to is more, the actual meaning is more derived by the net outcome, whether it was a distracting to you or it was, increasing your concentration, basically, because multitasking is a general word, as you just said. If it's distracting, that means we should avoid it, correct? Like vikshepa, we use the word hastakshep or vikshepa. Like, is it interfering into your?
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. And let's look at it from one other point of view, especially when we're talking about sadhana or Krishna consciousness, that we have a relationship with Krishna. And Krishna is his holy name. And Krishna is the Bhagavatam. And Krishna is the deity. And Krishna is there in the prasadam. And Krishna is there in the association of devotees. So from that point of view, if we look at it from that point of view, that may be another good way to guide us, right? If we actually understand Krishna is his holy name, and then what would be the best way to chant his holy name so that we are acting in that relationship? Or if Krishna is the Bhagavatam, what would be the way in that relationship where I can give my greatest focus on Krishna at that time? And similarly with the association of devotees and with the deities and etc. So that may give us perhaps a better focus when we think Abhinavam Nama Namino, that the name Krishna and himself is the same. So then how should we chant to develop that relationship with him? So so that takes us a little bit out of multitasking, not multitasking, but bringing it up to that spiritual level.
Yes, thank you very much.
I think it's not, time is up, yeah?
Yeah, 2 more minutes.
Aksha, 2 more minutes.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
As a handicapped man, I had to all the time use my walker.
Yes.
To use the mala only to chant. While walking, I'll chant always. Is that okay, or without mala, chanting is perfect? Or?
Yeah, without mala, chanting is perfect. If you've taken a vow to chant a certain amount, sometimes you can get these little clickers that go around your finger that don't take up much space, and you might be able to use that. But Krishna is, one name for Krishna is Bhava Grahi Janardhan, that he accepts the essence of our devotional offering. So Krishna can understand if we are using a walker or this or that, we have this or that, challenge, and he sees our sincerity. So yes, if you can walk all day, and this, by the way, this is not recommended. Okay, I just want to preface this, but even Prabhupada understood that. He had a disciple named Vibhu Chaitanya Prabhu, and there was a time in Vrindavan when he was the only cook. So he was cooking all 6 offerings, and when would he have time to chant? So Prabhupada just said, "You chant while you're cooking." Subtik. That's fine, but that was, just like a walker is a somewhat unusual experience, although more and more of us will be using them in the future. Similarly, a situation where you're cooking all 6 offerings, but Krishna understands the essence of our sincerity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for always wanting to chant. So this has been such a pleasure being with the Vaishnavas in Canada. I'm half Canadian, so this body is, so it makes me very happy to be with the devotees in Canada. And I once did the Christmas marathon book distribution or collection in Ottawa. I think that was the coldest I ever was in my life, but it was very blissful working out of the temple at that time. I think his name is Shankar, the town president at that time. Yeah. So thank you very much for your association.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, actually, it is for us to thank you. So you have kindly spent your time, I think, because you must have a lot of things to do, I can guess. So therefore, we really appreciate your efforts and the time and the way you actually conducted the class. It's interactive, and then I'm sure many people got quite a bit out of this. So we do hope that you'll have time to visit us again on another time.
Okay, as you like.
Well, we will work things out to that extent. One last thing, maybe for the next time, I'm saying a little bit in advance. So we know in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that above the mind is intelligence, above the mind, intelligence is the soul. So therefore, there must be some way of using those two factors in guiding the way how mind works. So something to think about, and maybe
very good.
We'll talk
very
about.
good. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Devotees, you can stay on for a little longer. So we're going to have a kirtan now. Hare Krishna.